Yahweh and his ways and studying and getting closer to him all the time. Hallelujah. Shabbat Shalom. Nice to see you. Why don't we stand and we'll recite this command about keeping the Sabbath day together. Please join with me. 6 days you labor and shall do all your work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath to Yahweh your Elohim. You do not do any work, you, nor your son, nor your daughter, nor your male servant, nor your female servant, nor your cattle, nor your stranger who is within your gates. For in 6 days Yahweh made the heavens and the earth, the sea and all that is in them, and rested the seventh day. Therefore Yahweh blessed the Sabbath day and set it apart. Amen. Please join with me in singing Shabbat Shalom together. Shabbat Shalom, Shabbat Shalom, Shabbat, 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 Shabbat Shalom, Shabbat Shalom, Shabbat Shalom, Shabbat, 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 Shabbat Shalom, Shabbat, 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 Shabbat Shalom, Shabbat, 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 Shabbat Shalom, Shabbat Shalom, Shabbat Shalom, Shabbat, 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 Shabbat Shalom. Hey, hallelujah. Amen. And then we have the Shema. Please join with me. Shema Yisrael, Yahweh Eloheinu, Yahweh Echad, Baruch Shem Kavod Malkuto Leolam Vayed. Hear, O Israel, Yahweh our Elohim, Yahweh is one. Blessed is the name of his esteemed kingdom for all eternity. Amen. And then the Ve'ahavta follows the Shema, which means, and you shall love. Ve'ahavta et Yahweh Elohecha b'kol levavecha uve'kol nafshecha uve'kol mehodecha ve'hayu hadvarim ha'ele asher hanochi mitzavacha yom alavovecha Vishem namtam levanecha virdibarta bam b'shivtecha b'vetecha u'alektecha v'derek u'visharbecha uvkumecha u'shartam leota yodecha ve'hayu letatafot b'neinecha Uktavtamo mazuzot beitecha, uvisharecha. And you shall love Yahweh your Elohim with all your heart, with all your being, and with all your might. And these words which I command you this day be upon your heart. Teach them diligently to your children, and speak of them when you sit in your house, when you walk by the way, when you lie down, and when you rise up. You shall bind them as a sign on your hand. They shall be as frontlets between your eyes, and write them on the doorpost of your house and upon your gates. Amen. Then we have a blessing before the reading of the Torah. Baruch et Yahweh Hamivorach. Baruch Yahweh Hamivorach Leolam Vayed. Baruch Yahweh Hamivorach Leolam Vayed. Baruch Atah Yahweh Eloheinu Melech HaOlam. Asher Baruch Banu Mikol HaHamim. V'natan Lanu et Torato. Baruch Atah Yahweh. Baruch Shemot Noten HaTorah. Amen. Bless Yahweh, the Blessed One. Blessed is Yahweh, the Blessed One, for all eternity. Blessed are you, Yahweh, our Elohim, King of the universe, who has chosen us from among all peoples and gave us his Torah. Blessed are you, Yahweh, bless his name, giver of the Torah. Amen. Please remain standing if you can for the reading of the Torah. You'll turn to Exodus, that's Shemot, Exodus chapter 19. Chapter 19. Our Torah portion actually begins in chapter 18, verse 1. We're going to be reading chapters 19 and 20. So chapter 19, beginning with verse 1. In the third new moon, after the children of Israel had come out of the land of Mitzrayim, on this day they came to the wilderness of Sinai. For they had set out from Rephidim and had come to the wilderness of Sinai and camped in the wilderness. So Israel camped there before the mountain. And Moshe went up to Elohim, and Yahweh called to him from the mountain, saying, "This is what you are to say to the house of Yaakov and declare to the children of Israel. You have seen what I did to the Mitzrites and how I bore you on eagle's wings and brought you to myself. And now if you diligently obey my voice and shall guard my covenant, then you shall be my treasured possession above all the peoples, for all the earth is mine. And you shall be to me a reign of priests and a set-apart nation. Those are the words which you are to speak to the children of Israel." And Moshe came and called for the elders of the people and set before them all these words which Yahweh commanded him. And the people answered together and said, "All that Yahweh has spoken we shall do." So Moshe brought back the words of the people to Yahweh. And Yahweh said to Moshe, "See, I am coming to you in a thick cloud, so that the people hear when I speak to you and believe you forever." And Moshe reported the words of the people to Yahweh. And Yahweh said to Moshe, "Go to the people and set them apart today and tomorrow. And they shall wash their garments and shall be prepared by the third day. For on the third day Yahweh shall come down upon Mount Sinai before the eyes of all the people. And you shall make a border for the people all around, saying, 'Take heed to yourselves, lest you do not go up to the mountain or touch the border of it. Whoever touches the mountain shall certainly be put to death. Not a hand is to touch it, but he shall certainly be stoned or shot through with an arrow, whether man or beast, he shall not live. When the Yobel sounds long, let them come near the mountain.' And Moshe came down from the mountain to the people and set the people apart, and they washed their garments. And he said to the people, 'Be prepared by the third day. Do not come near a wife.' And it came to be on the third day in the morning that there were thunders and lightnings and thick cloud on the mountain. And the voice of the shofar was very strong, and all the people who were in the camp trembled. And Moshe brought the people out of the camp to meet with Elohim, and they stood at the foot of the mountain. And Mount Sinai was in smoke, all of it, because Yahweh descended upon it in fire. And its smoke went up like the smoke of a furnace, and all the mountains trembled exceedingly. And when a voice of the shofar sounded long and became very strong, Moshe spoke, and Elohim answered him by voice. And Yahweh came down upon Mount Sinai on top of the mountain. And Yahweh called to Moshe to the top of the mountain, and Moshe went up. And Yahweh said to Moshe, "Go down and warn the people, lest they break through unto Yahweh to see, and many of them fall. And let the priests who come near Yahweh set themselves apart too, lest Yahweh break out against them." And Moshe said to Yahweh, "The people are not able to come up to Mount Sinai, for you warned us, saying, 'Make a border around the mountain and set it apart.' And Yahweh said to him, 'Come, go down, and then come up, you and Aharon with you. But do not let the priest and the people break through to come up to Yahweh, lest he break out against them.' And Moshe went down to the people and spoke to them." Chapter 20. And Elohim spoke all these words, saying, "I am Yahweh your Elohim, who brought you out of the land of Mitzrayim, out of the house of slavery. You have no other mighty ones against my face. You do not make for yourself a carved image or any likeness of that which is in the heavens above, or is in the earth beneath, or which is in the waters under the earth. You do not bow down to them or serve them, for I, Yahweh, your Elohim, am a jealous El, visiting the crookedness of the fathers on the children to the third and fourth generation of those who hate me, but showing loving commitment to thousands to those who love me and guard my commands. You do not bring the name of Yahweh your Elohim to naught, for he does not leave the one unpunished who brings his name to naught. Remember the Sabbath day to set it apart. 6 days you labor and shall do all your work. But the seventh day is the Sabbath of Yahweh your Elohim. You do not do any work, you nor your son, nor your daughter, nor your male servant, nor your female servant, nor your cattle, nor your stranger who is within your gates. For in 6 days Yahweh made the heavens and the earth, the sea, and all that is in them, and rested the seventh day. Therefore Yahweh blessed the Sabbath day and set it apart. Respect your father and your mother, so that your days are prolonged upon the soil which Yahweh your Elohim is giving you. You do not murder, you do not commit adultery, you do not steal, you do not bear false witness against your neighbor, you do not covet your neighbor's house, you do not covet your neighbor's wife, nor his male servant, nor his female servant, nor his ox, nor his donkey, or whatever belongs to your neighbor. And all the people saw the thunders, lightnings, flashes, and the voice of the shofar on the mountain smoking. And the people saw it, and they trembled and stood at a distance, and said to Moshe, You speak with us, and we hear, but let not Elohim speak with us, lest we die. And Moshe said to the people, Do not fear, for Elohim has come to prove you, in order that his fear be before you, so that you do not sin. So the people stood at a distance, but Moshe drew near the thick darkness where Elohim was. And Yahweh said to Moshe, Say this to the children of Israel, You yourselves have seen that I have spoken to you from the heavens. You do not make beside me mighty ones of silver. You do not make mighty ones of gold for yourselves. Make an altar of earth for me, and you shall slaughter on it your ascending offerings and your peace offerings, your sheep and your cattle. In every place where I cause my name to be remembered, I shall come to you and bless you. And if you make me an altar of stone, do not build it of cut stone, for if you use your chisel on it, you have profaned it. Nor do you go up by steps to my altar, lest your nakedness be exposed on it. Amen. Do we have a blessing after the reading of the Torah? Baruch atah Yahweh Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan lanu Torah emet, v'kei olam nata b'tochenu. Baruch atah Yahweh, Baruch Shemot noten ha-Torah. Amen. Blessed are you, Yahweh our Elohim, King of the universe, who has given us the Torah of truth and planted everlasting life within us. Blessed are you, Yahweh. Bless his name, giver of the Torah. Amen. You may be seated. If you'll turn back to chapter 18, verse 1, so the beginning of the Torah portion. And we read from the third that, so since we're on the triennial cycle, begins actually in chapter 18, verse 1. Before we begin, let's pray. Abba, Father, we thank you for all the blessings that you bestow upon your people. It doesn't seem, Father, like we deserve any of them. But you do put your blessings upon your people. You know exactly what we're going to do in the future. You know how we're going to respond. But yet you still cherish us and love us anyway. Though I praise you, Yahweh, for your salvation, for your mercy, for your deliverance that you have done for your people back here and you're still doing for your people today. We are delivered every day. The powers of darkness cannot overtake us because we have you, our Messiah, Yeshua, and the victory is in you. So I praise you for the victory you have in you and in your name and the strength and the power that you give to each one of us, that you fill our hearts with. I praise you, Yahweh, for your amazing power and your amazing grace. In Yeshua's name and in your name, O Yahweh. Amen. So I was looking at the Torah portion, the beginning of it here. The title is Yithro, which you can see up on our screen. Yithro is the name of our Torah portion. And there's a few words here in this first verse that I wanted to touch on before we go into the part that we read. I'll just read the first verse here, 18:1. And Yithro, the priest of Midian, Moshe's father-in-law, heard of all that Elohim had done for Moshe, for Israel his people, that Yahweh had brought Israel out of Mitzrayim. You know, when I was contemplating the Torah portion, the name Yithro, and I was thinking how in all the other different Torah portions that we've looked at and how the name of the Torah portion can always be almost like a summary, if you will, of the whole Torah portion and exactly what Yahweh is trying to tell us in a physical and a spiritual sense. So Yithro, when I looked it up, meant His Excellency. And my Bible uses a small h for His. It says His Excellency, or perhaps His righteousness. Well, I'd like to touch on that a little bit, but before I do, I want to explain to you that Yithro is not the father-in-law of Moshe's name. His name is actually Ra'ul. Ra'ul is, if you turn back to Exodus chapter 2, many of you have already seen this, but in Exodus chapter 2, in verse 18, this is when Moshe had fled from Pharaoh in Egypt and come to this land where he ends up marrying and having 2 sons. It says in 18, and they came to Reuel, their father, and he said, how is it that you have come so soon today? So this is the daughters, perhaps, that have come back, and because Moshe had delivered them and rescued them so that they could water their flock, which I find interesting because that is what Moshe is going to do, just like Yahweh is going to do. He's going to water his flock. And we need that water. We need that Yeshua, our living water. So there's a picture of, in Moshe, many ways, and that has a picture of our Messiah today. Wouldn't you agree? Yeah. So here it shows that the name of Yithro, father-in-law of Moshe, is actually Ra'ul. Well, Ra'ul means friend of El. Now, when I was over in Israel, they had kind of a tour that we took, and we went to the descendants of Ra'ul, or Jethro. And they're called the Druze today. D-R-U-Z-E, if you're taking notes. I believe it's how it's spelled. So these Druze today, they're actually allies of Israel. Hence, Ra'ul's name, friend of El. They will fight with the IDF. Not against them, but with them. They will fight with them. They'll join the ranks of the IDF and fight against Israel's enemies. And they're actually Arabs, if you will, but they're Arabs that are very secretive in their religion. And when we went to visit them, they brought us into a conference room, and we sat and we listened to how they conduct their school there, and they have school for the children there. And there's quite a few Druze now. I'm not sure the exact number, but a pretty good amount of them. So another place that we visited when we were in Israel was it's kind of like a memorial center. And they were showing all the Israeli soldiers that had died, and they also had listed Druze that had fought alongside Israel, and they had died as well. So they had given their lives for Israel. Friend of El is Raul's meaning of his name. So up here with Yithro is actually a title then. It's not actually his name. Yithro is a title, kind of like Pharaoh is a title. It means king. So here, Yithro just means his excellency or his righteousness. And I was thinking about righteousness. And it's not a person's righteousness, this little h. It says his righteousness or his excellency. That is what's important for us, is it? What is important for us if you change that little h to a big H? It's talking about our Messiah, Yeshua, is it not? So in him we are righteous only. Nothing that what we have of ourselves is righteous, but within him we are righteous. And then the Father looks upon us as righteous. I guess that's a good way to describe it, wouldn't you say? If you have a comment, raise your hand and Darren will bring you the mic.
What exactly do they mean by people being righteous?
Well,
What exactly do they mean by people being righteous?
Well, there's a whole definition of what it means to be righteous, and I think that righteousness has to do with being humility before Yahweh, on your face before him, recognizing that like the sinner that was standing beside the Pharisee, and the Pharisee was praying all these things about how his righteousness was so wonderful, and the sinner said, well, I can't even look at Yahweh, and so he falls on his face in repentance, and this is righteousness. And then Yahweh bestows upon him his power and his strength when he cries out in repentance. The plan of salvation basically is all there. When you cry out for in repentance, recognizing that you have violated Yahweh's ways, then Yahweh is faithful to forgive and to cleanse us, and then that righteousness of his comes upon us. If there anybody else that has a definition, please raise your hand.
Steve, I think that's an excellent definition of it, because a lot of people misconstrue that you're pure, you're holy, you don't sin. It ain't the amount of sin or what sins don't determine you're righteous, because the word's clear that we get our righteousness from him. You're better off to be a sinner, out carousing, drunk, or what, and acknowledge that as sin, than you are to be pure and rarely do any sins, but acknowledge no sin.
Amen.
That the one righteousness is in him, and that excellent definition. It's when you're willing to go before Yahweh in repentance. That's what makes you righteous, not calculating how many sins you do.
Amen. Pastor Rick.
Actually, righteousness in both the Hebrew and the Greek are tied closely with justify or justification. Number one, it tells us that we need to be cleansed, made innocent, not guilty. Okay, we can't do that on our own, of course. We can't do that. But it also, the righteousness part is really about having a right standing before Yahweh. Okay, it's pretty much a legal understanding of what we were before we were guilty, but he made us righteous and justified us and made us clean and innocent, not guilty before him.
Amen. We're cleansed by his blood, are we not? His blood covering is over us, and I suppose you could see that also as a picture of our righteousness.
And perhaps we can fold this in Genesis 15:6. And Abram believed in Yahweh, and he reckoned it to him for righteousness. So it's believing what he says about us, his
Amen.
way, his path of salvation.
Very good, very good. That's right. If you turn to Exodus chapter 20, where we started reading from, this is another picture of of what we're talking about, his righteousness, and it's all in the first command. Chapter 20, verse 1 says, and Elohim spoke all these words, saying, verse 2, I am Yahweh your Elohim, who brought you out of the land of Mitzrayim, out of the house of slavery. This is the first command. The second command is, you shall have no other mighty ones against my face, and do not make for yourself a carved image. More definition of a mighty one, or other gods. That's the second command. But the first command is, I am Yahweh your Elohim, who brought you out of the land of Mitzrayim, out of the house of slavery. And what I'm seeing here is that within this first command, Yahweh is saying that I am your righteousness. I am Yahweh who brought you out. I delivered you. I took you out of this bondage, this slavery of sin. I became death for you. And I died, and I rose again so that you could have life. And in this is the righteousness of Elohim. So you're restored back to life, if you will. But you have to make a choice to choose him. Wouldn't you say? I don't believe that we're puppets on a string, do you? And we don't have a choice? Oh, he just saved me and I didn't have any choice. Or maybe I'm doing evil things and I don't even have a choice. There is that theology out there. Pastor Rick.
Well, actually, it's even tied up in John 3:16, where he says that it's for those who believe. And so you have a choice to believe or not believe. And that gives you that free will to do whatever it is that you're going to do.
Amen. You know, we read from this chapter 19 and chapter 20, but there's something more here in chapter 18 that I wanted to touch on. It says Yithro, when we touched on his name, this name, his real name is Raul, but Yithro is a title. And then it says the priest of Midian. Well, a priest in the Hebrew text here is the word Kohen. So the word Kohen is used here for Yithro being this priest of Midian. You see, who's the Kohen of Midian. And Midian means brawling, contention, quarrel, discord, and strife. So he was the priest of, if you will, brawling, contention, quarrel, discord, and strife. And the reason I believe it's true is because Yithro, the meaning of his name, now I can't look into the man's heart and I wasn't there, but the meaning of his name has to do with his excellency, building himself up. And when you do that, it's not your righteousness. We need the righteousness of Yahweh covering us so we can be declared righteous before Yahweh. And so I was thinking of how, if you turn to Matthew chapter 20, actually Matthew chapter 5. Matthew chapter 5 and verse 20 says, actually, let's back up to the very well-known passages that we've talked about, where Yeshua says in verse 17, do not think I came to destroy the Torah of the prophets. I did not come to destroy, but to complete. That word complete has to do with restore. Verse 18, for truly I say to you, till heaven and earth pass away, not one jot or tittle shall by no means pass from the Torah till all be done. So very, very particular. Nothing's going to pass away from the Torah. Verse 19, whoever then breaks one of the least of these commands and teaches men so shall be called least in the kingdom of heaven. But whoever does and teaches them, the least, shall be called great in the reign of the heavens. So a least command, if you can think of one, if you're teaching it, you're going to be least in the restoration of Israel. But if you teach the least, you're going to become great in helping with the restoration of Israel, if you will. So then verse 20 says, for I say to you, unless your righteousness exceeds that of the scribes and Pharisees, you shall by no means enter into the reign of the heavens or the kingdom of heaven. So your righteousness is what Yeshua is saying needs to exceed that of the scribes and Pharisees. So how does that happen, brothers and sisters? How do we exceed the righteousness of the scribes and Pharisees?
Well, you just said it. You bow down and receive forgiveness for all your sins. He throws them as far as the east is from the west, and that exceeds the righteousness of the Pharisees, because they do not trust in the blood of Yeshua
Amen.
to do so.
Okay, very good.
And that's the only way you can exceed their righteousness.
Good.
Actually, we see it in chapter 20 of Exodus. And they were expected to receive his breath, his words, and they did not. Okay, so that's a good example of how to exceed the righteousness of the Pharisees, is because they were to receive him, to receive his word. And you know what? It's quite frankly, that's the difference between legalism and living the life today.
Amen.
It's about his ruach within us, his breath within us that lives out his commands.
Amen. Amen. Anyone else? Any thoughts you want to share? How our righteousness exceeds that of the scribes and Pharisees. So let me ask you a question. What was it that the scribes and Pharisees considered to be righteous, to make themselves righteous?
Keeping all the law in a very legalistic way. Trying to do everything, tithing their spices, and just overboard.
Okay, wouldn't you say that it would be great to go overboard on Yahweh's Torah and just to really love his Torah and keep it to the nth degree? I would say so, but there's something else. Go ahead.
Well, the Pharisees, they were adding to the Torah. They were doing all these added on laws that was making it a burden for the people. And if you look at the letters, the Hebrew letters of Yitro, then if you take those two in the middle and just kind of put them on hold and look at the first and the last letter, it's the Yod and the Vav. Yod He Vav He. This is Yod Torah Vav.
Mm-hmm.
So it's the strength. It's the Father's name in the written Torah.
Okay. Someone else? You know, I used to think that fences around the Torah were just rabbinic, and those weren't necessarily what we're supposed to keep. But did you know that within the Torah there are actually fences built around the Torah, and Yeshua actually taught this? For instance, Yeshua said, "You have seen it written that you shall not murder." He says, if you have hated someone in your heart, you have committed murder. So he says, by not hating, you keep yourself from committing murder. This is considered offense. So a fence around the Torah, it can actually be part of Torah. Go ahead.
We can actually see in Genesis when they were before the tree of good of the knowledge of good and evil, and Yahweh had told them, or told Adam, to not partake of the tree. But when in the conversation with Hasatan, what happened with the serpent? What happened was that she said we weren't to touch the tree. And so the idea of adding and subtracting from Yahweh's word gets us in trouble. In fact, the rabbis did both. They added and subtracted from the word.
Amen. So as I was looking at this, how does your righteousness exceed that of scribes and Pharisees? Well, we know that our righteousness is, what we've talked about, is in our Messiah, Yeshua, and through repentance, falling on our face in repentance, and then receiving that forgiveness. And then we're covered by his blood covering, and he comes in and makes us righteous. But the scribes and Pharisees weren't understanding that concept of their Messiah. And by the way, they are looking for the Messiah. Jews today are looking for the Messiah. So in that sense, they're messianic, if you will, in that sense. But they just missed him, our Messiah Yeshua, which they will hopefully see, all of them will see one day. I pray that they will. But they were doing the commandments for salvation, which is what basically we've been talking about. They were doing the commandments for salvation, and they thought that was their righteousness. When I was over in Israel and I went to a synagogue after they had a bar mitzvah, which was real fun, two young boys bar mitzvahing, the rabbi got up and did a little short teaching, and he said that their righteousness, or that their salvation, was in good deeds. That's what saved them. It's not that we're not supposed to do good deeds, is it? We're supposed to do good deeds or do Yahweh's commands, because Yeshua says, if you love me, keep my commands. So it doesn't rule out doing them, but we're doing them because of our salvation in Messiah Yeshua, and he enables us to do them in his strength, not ours. Oh, that would be real tiring if we had to do it on our own, wouldn't it? Yeah. Turning back to the Torah portion here, or at least chapter 18. So we touched on Yithro. That means his excellency or his righteousness. So we know that that's not of Yahweh, is not our righteousness. The root meaning of Jethro's name is a plentiful remnant of excess residue or a remainder. Kind of gives those words for the root meaning of his name. I was thinking of when you boil and you smelt something, like a metal, and you get dross comes to the surface. Excess residue, a plentiful remnant of excess residue or something remainder is kind of the root meaning of his excellency. And then he's the priest of Midian, which has to do with brawling, contention, quarrel, discord, and strife. We don't have any of that in our community, do we? We're not supposed to have. And then it says, so this is Yithro, the priest of Midian, Moshe's father-in-law. So then Moshe is used. Moshe is a picture of our Messiah Yeshua, that picture of Yeshua, our deliverer. Moshe has to do with meaning of being drawn out of water, a rescue. And we know that that picture of water, if you will, is the Yeshua, the living water. Then it says father-in-law. And by the way, father is not there in the Hebrew text. In is not there, but law is. And it's not Torah. It's not the word Torah. If you look in the Aleph Tav Bible, it says father in Torah. It's mistranslated. The word law here is not Torah, but it's katan. The word chet tav, final noon. Katan is the word that's in Hebrew. That's the only word that's there in place of father-in-law. It's just simply the word katan. So Moshe's katan, it says in Hebrew. And katan means to give away in marriage or join in affinity. Affinity is defined as the husband and bride are joined together through relations by blood between a husband and his wife's kindred, and between a wife and her husband's kindred. So you have relatives, blood relatives coming together to sanctify the union under Yahweh. So this giving away in marriage has to do with blood as well. This is the word affinity. This is the katan. This is Moshe's father-in-law, but that's not the word that's used in the Hebrew. It's simply katan. So Moshe's katan. So in the spiritual picture, if you will, since we're the bride of Messiah, Israel, we're being joined together in marriage to our husband Yeshua through his blood covering over us. So that's the picture that you see here. So you could say that Yithro is excess residue that is afflicting, or by by this brawl and contention, quarrel, discourse, and strife against Yeshua, our deliverer. Yeshua, our deliverer and husband, he wants to be for us, to receive us in marriage from the Father through his blood covenant with us for Israel. And do you know that this father-in-law, or this Khatan, is mentioned 13 times in chapter 18? Well, do you think that that's a mistake? That his father-in-law or Khatan is mentioned 13 times in chapter 18. We know that Khatan has to do with blood covering of a husband, giving away in marriage. So I see the 12 tribes of Israel here, and I also see the nations. Anyone, John 3:16, the first verse I learned when I was a little boy, for Yahweh so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever shall believe in him should not perish but have everlasting life. So that includes anybody that comes to a saving knowledge of him through repentance. And that's going to be, he's talking about 13 times it's mentioned. So you could say that he's talking about the 12 tribes of Israel plus anyone who wants to sojourn with Israel and come in, that would be the nations. That's the picture I saw. Whether you believe that or not, that's okay. I just love to see our Messiah Yeshua in the passages and how he wants to deliver us because of his blood covering. And you know, there's so much power in that blood covering. You can out loud proclaim Yeshua's blood covering over you and your family. And demonic forces don't like that. It's like, what is it that would repel bugs? Yeah. Whatever you can think of that would repel bugs. This is the repellent for demonic forces, is Yeshua's blood covering. Amen. Let's jump up to chapter 19, where we read from. It says, in the third new moon, verse 1, in the third new moon, after the children of Israel had come out of the land of Mitzrayim, on this day, they came to the wilderness of Sinai. And it says, on this day, this third new moon, on this day. So to me, that's meaning this day of this third new moon. When did they come out of Mitzrayim? It was on the 15th day of the month. So then they go 15 days, or if you will, perhaps maybe one less, since the beginning of the counting of the Omer starts on the 16th of Aviv. They actually, by the way, they didn't actually get out of Mitzrayim until the second day, because they came out come out of Goshen or Ramses. It's all the same area, Ramses. There's no city, Ramses. It's just this huge area, the delta, this Nile delta. It's Ramses, and it's also called Goshen. So they come out of there, and they come down to Sukkot, and they camp there. And then from there, they go over to Etham. So I'm imagining that Moshe, who was probably trained in military understanding, and he was probably perhaps a general maybe before he fled. I'm not sure, but he, age of 40 is when he fled. It talks about in Acts when Stephen is recalling in Acts that he was approximately 40 when he fled. Well, he would have been trained, so he would assemble probably now the greatest group of people he had ever assembled to go out. So they go out, and then they come to, in chapter 16, if you back up there of Exodus, after they had left Mitzrayim, it says, and they set out from Elim in verse 1, chapter 16, verse 1. And they set out from Elim, and all the congregation of the children of Israel came to the wilderness of Sin, which is between Elim and Sinai, on the 15th day of the second new moon after they came out. So that's 30 days, perhaps, or maybe it's 29 days, based on coming out of Mitzrayim. If you go by Yom HaBikurim, which means day of first fruits, which is when the counting starts for 50-day count. The 50-day count, if you take it from there, the 16th of Aviv, which is the morrow after the Sabbath of unleavened bread, not the morrow after the weekly Sabbath, and you count 50 days, that's when coming to Mount Sinai would be. That would be 50 days. So they're coming out, and they've arrived here in this place 30 days later, or 29 days later. And then in chapter 19, where we're at, it says in the third new moon. So that would be perhaps, you could say 30, 15 equals 45, or you could say 29, 16 equals 45. Either way, it's right about 45 days to get to this point. And the reason I know that is because when we read through chapter 19, Moshe goes up to the mountain and down the mountain to receive some instruction. Well, how long would it take you to go up the mountain and come down the mountain and receiving instruction and giving it to people? I think that's probably going to be a day. And then he goes up to the mountain and down the mountain again. And then it says that he sets them apart for 3 days. So there's 2 days up and down the mountain and 3 days set apart, plus 45 equals 50 days. That's starting from their count when they left Mitzrayim for Yom HaBikurim, which would be the 16th of Aviv, the morrow after the Sabbath of unleavened bread. That's one teaching on it. There's several others where you would start from the Sabbath, the Saturday Sabbath, if you will. But in my estimation, if they would have done that, I don't know what the Gregorian day would have been back then when they left. But why does it say in our scriptures that they're to count for themselves 7 completed Sabbaths, if you will, or weeks in Deuteronomy, but then also count 50 days? So I took my calendar, and I took the Passover for this year, which happens to be, Passover for this year is April 10th, which is a Monday. That's the 14th of Aviv. The 15th of Aviv is Day of Unleavened Bread, which is when you also eat the lamb. And that's Tuesday for this year, April 11th. So the 10th of April this year is preparation or for the Pesach, getting the Pesach ready, which is called Passover or the Pesach. And then you go into unleavened bread, which is April 11th, Tuesday. And then the 16th of Aviv would be the 12th of April this year, and that's a Wednesday. So if you count 50 days from there, you arrive at May 31st for this year, which would be Shavuot. So in counting those Sabbaths, what I did on my calendar is I went, since Monday or Tuesday is when first day of unleavened bread is, I went over and I counted each Sabbath, and there's 7 Sabbaths, weekly Sabbaths, before I get to May 31st, which is Shavuot. So I land on Wednesday when I'm counting. So if you're counting Sabbaths, you're also supposed to count 50 days. So when you count those Sabbaths, you don't arrive on Shavuot. You need to also count 50 days, because it's going to be a few days more to get to Shavuot for this year, which is Wednesday. I don't know if that makes sense or if that's clear as mud or what. But if you look on a calendar, I can show you how it works. So that's one of the teachings of how you get from the 50 days to Shavuot, from unleavened bread to Shavuot, or the morrow after the Sabbath, which would be the Sabbath of unleavened bread during Passover, or if you want to count from the weekly Sabbath. However you do it, we arrive 50 days later, and we have Shavuot, which is here, what they've arrived at. They've arrived at Mount Sinai, and they're given the Torah. So this is what Shavuot is all about, isn't it? It's about giving of the Torah. And there's more to it than just giving of the Torah, right? Because oh, that sounds great. I love that song. So their giving of the Torah is not just giving of the letter of the law. Do you think that Yahweh's Ruach was involved with this, of the giving of the Torah at Mount Sinai? I think so. So we need the Ruach with the letter of the law. And the letter of the law is not bad, it's wonderful. But it needs Yahweh's Ruach in it. My son was talking to me about the youth group that he's been involved in. If you turn to Acts chapter 2, he gave me a question that they had asked him. They said, when is Pentecost? Or what is Pentecost? And Pentecost is Shavuot. I told him. I said, well, you may not want to tell them that because they probably won't know what that means. But you can tell them Pentecost is the giving of the Torah at Mount Sinai. I said, well, maybe you don't want to tell them that either because they may not get that. But it says in Acts chapter 1, it says, or Acts chapter 2, let me get there. It says, when the day of the festival of, in my ISR it says Shavuot. In my King James Bible it says, when the day of the festival of Pentecost had come, they were all with one mind in one place. And there came this sound from the heavens as a rushing mighty wind and filled the house where they were sitting, and it appeared to them as divided tongues of fire and settling on each one of them. This is the Ruach came in and filled them, if you will. Now, was this the first time that the Ruach was ever given? Nobody ever had the Ruach before this? I don't think so. There's lots of examples we could give out throughout Torah of men being filled with the Ruach. How about when the 70 elders came and Yahweh took from the Ruach that was upon Moshe and put it on all of the elders, and it did not deplete Moshe, but it filled each one up to the brim with this Ruach. Hallelujah. I just pray that we can be filled with his Ruach, an extra measure of his Ruach for what we need. And brothers and sisters, we need his Ruach in our lives. Amen. We can't find any truth on our own without his Ruach. If you think you can, well, I suppose there's men's wisdom. But I think that in order to be guided into understanding of the truth of our Messiah, Yeshua, I mean, look at Paul, how intelligent that man must have been, Shaul, and how he was a scholar of the Torah, and yet he didn't have the Ruach until he was confronted by Yeshua and filled with his Ruach. Amen. So it says here in chapter 2, verse 1 of Acts, it says that they were all with one mind in one place. Brothers and sisters, we cannot force one-mindedness within the Hebraic community or within the Christendom or the followers of Abraham, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, that following Yahweh. We can't force one-mindedness, but we can love each other right where each person is at, and that is also righteousness. Loving each person right where they're at in their walk, not condemning in any way. Hallelujah. Go ahead.
To support what you had said about the Ruach being within men of old, 1 Peter 1, 10 and 11 speaks of the prophets of old. In verse 11 it says, and the Spirit of Messiah who was in them.
Amen. Amen. Very good. proof that our Messiah, from the very beginning, walked with Adam in the garden and gave him his ruach. He breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and that it's not just air. Yeah, air, because we need that in our lungs, don't we? But in order to live for him, not for, there's one realm or another that you're going to be serving. You can't serve both at one time. You want to serve in Yahweh's realm, the realm of life. Amen. Turning back to Exodus chapter 19. It says that in verse 3, it says, and Moshe went up to Elohim, and Yahweh called to him from the mountain, saying, this is what you are to say to the house of Yaakov and declare to the children of Israel. I was wondering, why does it say the house of Yaakov and the children of Israel? Why does it use both those names? Wasn't Yaakov's name changed to Israel? So why is Yahweh himself saying the house of Yaakov and the children of Israel? I heard it once said about children of Israel. The reason that they were calling them children of Israel, because they were really acting like children. In their whole walk with Yahweh here, they were just acting like children. So I was wondering about this house of Yaakov and children of Israel. And so the understanding of Yaakov, which we all know, has to do with heel catcher, right? Well, heel catcher is actually an offensive move. You grab a heel and you raise it up and you have your opponent off balance. And all you got to do is lift it a little higher and your opponent goes on their back. That's the picture of what we have in our Messiah, Yeshua, when we catch the heel of our enemy, which is what Yaakov did on the way out of the womb. He had a hold of Esau's heel, which is the enemy. Esau was an enemy, even though he was his brother. And so it has to do with catching by the heel, grabbing Esau's heel. Circumventing is another definition in the root word, or to restrain. And so the spiritual picture for us is, we're circumventing or we're restraining the Torahless enemy of Yahweh in Yahweh's power, not our own strength. But we talked about that. Only in Yahweh's strength can we have this, that he has given us in Yeshua's name. Well, we got to proclaim Yeshua's name out loud, because demons can't hear you. They can't hear what you're thinking. So you proclaim it out loud. They don't like that, especially when you claim his blood covering over you. In his ruach, by his ruach, and his written word. You can speak forth the written word of Yahweh. They know Yahweh's word, and they're going to try to twist it against us. And by doing this, using his name, his blood covering, his ruach, his written word on us, I say we crush Satan's plan. What do you say? I say we crush his plan. He has nothing on us when we have all of that going for us. We diligently obey. Verse 5. All this is by verse 5 here in chapter 19. It says, and now if you diligently obey my voice and shall guard my covenant, then you shall be my treasured possession above all peoples, for the earth is mine. In verse 6, and you shall be to me a reign or a kingdom of priests and a set apart nation. These are the words which Moshe was to speak to the children of Israel. It's huge here, just in these two verses of that Israel. This is Yaakov, and then Israel. Israel means prevailing with Elohim. So prevailing with Elohim goes back to the word Yaakov, when Jacob fought or wrestled with Yeshua, the incarnate Yeshua, and it says that he prevailed, or he took on Yeshua's power, a choice to make, to take on his power. How do you take on the power of Yeshua? How do you take on his power? Don't you want that in your life? Don't you want the power that created the universe within you that you can utilize against the enemy?
I think the best place that I found that is what Scripture says, is that we submit to Elohim and resist the devil, and he'll flee. Now, we can resist the devil without submitting to Elohim, but you won't have victory.
Amen.
That puzzled me, the house of Jacob in Israel, for a long time. And what I came to the conclusion to believe that when he was Jacob, he was walking in the flesh. And he got the name Israel when he was reborn. It's a picture of being born again, the flesh, and being born again. So I think these commandments, what he's saying, is they're not only physical, literal, but they're also spiritual.
Amen.
Because people will debate, well, those commandments are spiritual. You don't really have to keep Saturday as the Sabbath. Or, see what I'm saying?
Sure.
But I believe he's clearly stating that it's both in this passage.
Amen. So there's a picture here of us with Yaakov circumventing the enemy. When we take on his power, not working in the flesh at all, like Darren just said. We don't want to work in the flesh. We want his power. So circumventing the enemy and then prevailing with Yahweh, taking on Yeshua's power to do that. And I think that's one of the reasons why he used house of Yaakov declared to the children of Israel here. Because it's a spiritual picture for us of how we have victory over the enemy. And then it says in verse 4, right in between these two, it says, and you have seen how I did to the Mitzrites and how I bore you on eagle's wings. Bearing has to do with nasa, which the Hebrew word nasa, which means to lift up. And eagle's wings, now this is a really good one. I never even saw this before. But eagles, when I looked up the word eagles, it's neshur in the Hebrew. Neshur, I think I'm pronouncing that correctly, but it means to lacerate. To lacerate, eagle's wings, bearing you on eagle's wings means to lacerate. And I thought, okay, well, he's picking us up to lacerate us. Well, lacerate means to tear or to rend the flesh, or figuratively the heart. So he's picking us up so that he can tear into our flesh and do surgery on us, if you will. I don't know another spiritual application, do you, of what Yahweh wants to tear into us and make us so that our strength, our human flesh is of nothing because we're torn. We need Yeshua's power. And it said figuratively the heart, to lacerate. So you've heard about when surgeons open up and do the heart surgery, they cut into a membrane. They cut through a membrane in order to get to the heart. And that's where Yahweh wants to cut through that membrane of our own strength and get to our heart and do surgery on our heart. Yahweh wants to tear or to rend our flesh in this spiritual sense so that we have to rely on him. Then he can do this surgery, and it has to do with, it's a choice, right? We have to turn and repent, recognizing that we're guilty of death. But only through that repentance and that forgiveness comes. Hallelujah. And we have power and strength in him. We have time for one more comment, and then we need to close.
Yeah, in Revelation 12:14 is a similar language as it is in Exodus 19:4.
Very good. Let's close with this. Turn to Deuteronomy chapter 32. This is Moshe, chapter 32, speaking this song to Israel. And he says, beginning in verse 9, for the portion of Yahweh is his people, Yaakov his allotted inheritance. He found him in a wilderness. He was wasted, howling desert. He encompassed him. He made him understand. He watched over him as the apple of his eye. Verse 11, and as an eagle stirs up its nest, flutters over its young, spreading out its wings, taking them up, bearing them on its wings. Yahweh comes in and lifts us up and carries us, but we have to be broken. We can come under the feathers of his protection as a hen covers over its young and protects them. And as they grow, they venture out. And so do we in the strength and power of our Messiah, Yeshua. Hallelujah. Amen. But Father, I thank you and praise you for your Torah, for your understanding that you're giving us. I pray discernment and wisdom for each heart here. For the wicked one the enemy of our souls coming against us in wickedness, trying to lead us off your path so that he can go before the Father and accuse us before the Father. Oh, Yahweh, I pray not to give Hasatan any ammunition against us, that we, the blood covering of Yeshua over us, presenting us white as snow. Oh, Father, I thank you and praise you for that, and how you give us your strength. In Yeshua's name and in your name, O Yahweh. Amen.